On today's show, the Houston Rockets fall in the NBA draft lottery, and the Southwest Division just got a whole lot tougher. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our shows to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Just head on over to FanDuel.com. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. Houston Rockets falling in the NBA draft lottery one spot. They will be picking 10th overall in the 2025 NBA draft. The lottery gods did not look upon the Rockets ping pong balls with favor this year. Two teams they did shine a light upon, though. The Dallas Mavericks winning the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. My goodness. And then to add insult to injury, if you're a Rockets fan, the San Antonio Spurs get the second overall selection, a 1.8% chance for the Dallas Mavericks to win that number one overall pick. And then San Antonio with a 6.3% chance of winning the number two overall pick. Just the most unfortunate set of events watching this play out from a Rockets tinted perspective. And look, we'll navigate, and we're just going to talk about the lottery results here for a moment. And then we'll get into kind of what does it look like if the Rockets keep the pick, what some of the mock drafts are currently saying about some of the guys available around pick number 10. And then we'll get into what I feel like is the more likely scenario of what does it mean if they are trying to trade that 10th overall selection, and kind of some of the different ways that could come about or what that could ultimately look like. But I'll tell you what, from the jump, the NBA is not beating the rigged allegations with the result of this draft lottery. It's almost too perfect, right? Luka Doncic traded to the Lakers, the most absurd trade in professional sports history. And then you turn around and the Dallas Mavericks win the number one overall pick to be able to walk right into their next franchise player in Cooper Flag. Seriously? And there's a history of the NBA doing this, right? Chris Paul traded to LA. Pelicans win the number one overall pick and they get Anthony Davis. LeBron James leaves Cleveland, goes to Miami. Cavaliers win the number one overall pick and get Kyrie Irving. Then Anthony Davis forces his way out of New Orleans to get to LA. And guess what? They get the number one overall pick again and win the Zion Williamson sweepstakes. And now the latest in those sets of occurrences, you have the Dallas Mavericks walking into their next franchise player after Nico Harrison botching this whole, just a ridiculous set of circumstances. And that's not the only ones, right? Like you have the Derrick Rose draft where he goes to his hometown, Chicago. They jumped up in the draft. You have LeBron going to Cleveland after growing up in Akron, Ohio, right down the street. Like just look, at the end of the day, I understand. And I know that there's like, Ernst & Young, the law firm is, they're a billion-dollar law firm, and they are a bigger entity than the NBA actually is. And it would, like, I don't know. It's not actually rigged. It just feels so rigged. It just does. And that's just the reaction. That's the narrative surrounding this. It's like the NBA is not even trying to hide it. And maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not gonna put the tinfoil hat on. It just sucks to watch two interdivision rivals get that much better. Like the Mavericks looked like they were gonna be on their deathbed with no Kyrie Irving next season and an Anthony Davis that can't stay healthy, and this, Nico Harrison defense wins championships, all that stuff. And they just walked right into their next franchise player. And Cooper Flagg's probably going to be at some point, a top 10, top 5 player in the NBA. So that sucks. And then the Spurs get the number 2 overall pick. Like, are you kidding me right now? They're going to walk into Dillon Harper, or potentially even worse than that, because they're set up to be able to try and win now. That might be the juiciest trade package now to offer to the Milwaukee Bucks in the Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes, something that we were going to, and we're still going to talk about here at Locked On Rockets, and how the Rockets can get involved, and should they get involved in the Giannis sweepstakes, and what a trade package would look like if you were the Houston Rockets trying to pursue Giannis's services. But it might not matter, because the Spurs might just have the most attractive trade offer now if the Bucks deem Dillon Harper a worthy kind of cornerstone talent to reignite or restart their rebuild in the post-Giannis era. So it really sucks from that perspective, whether the Spurs draft at number 2 and take Dillon Harper, or whether they trade that pick for Giannis or some other kind of impact win now piece. Like, both the Mavericks and Spurs just got a hell of a lot better, and both of those teams missed the playoffs this season. If you thought the West was a bloodbath before, it is about to be absolutely brutal this next year. And Mavericks maybe not so much. They're going to be missing Kyrie for most of the year, so less scared of them than the Spurs potentially making an all-in move for Giannis and then having a front court of Giannis and Wemby, because that would just be a defensive nightmare to go up against on a night-to-night basis. But look, this is not Locked On Mavs. This is not Locked On Spurs. You can go check out those podcasts for those reactions. But it just sucks as far as how that relates to the Rockets and what it means for them moving forward. But look, Rockets fall to pick number 10. It's unfortunate. But at the end of the day, the percentages of them jumping up into the top 4 were very slim. And, we kind of fully expected them to be somewhere around pick 9 or pick 10 in the first place. So with that, I do want to get into what some of the mock drafts are saying. Should the Rockets keep this 10th overall pick and add another young piece to their already stacked young core, or should they look to trade the pick, and what some of those options might ultimately look like? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Hungry Root. Look, everyone in my household always has something going on, and that's called busy season, right? Everybody's preoccupied with stuff. And for me, that means that I don't have time to go grocery shopping or to cook healthy meals. And that's why I use Hungry Root. Hungry Root is like having your own personal shopper and nutritionist wrapped into one. They take care of grocery shopping and meal planning, offering personalized recommendations based on your tastes and health goals. The best part about using Hungry Root is it tailors your orders based on what you liked or didn't absolutely love. It gets smarter every single time. They have high quality, nutritious foods you can stick to whatever your dietary restrictions are. Maybe it's gluten-free, maybe you want a low carb diet, maybe you're trying to avoid sugars, all that stuff. You can achieve your health goals with Hungry Root. So take advantage of this exclusive deal. Get 40% off your first box, plus a free item in every box for life. They want to give you a free item in every single package for life. Go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA for 40% off and a lifetime free item. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monarch Money. If you've ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? You need Monarch Money. Look, between dining out, online shopping, entertainment costs, it can be really easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a regular old budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you can start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I was disappointed and not really surprised, but yeah, maybe just a little disappointed in myself about how much I was spending on food, right? Fast food, food delivery, stuff like that, just dining out at restaurants. Now I budget smarter and save more. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LockedOnNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LockedOnNBA for half off your first year. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. One more tidbit of, I guess, somewhat good news here for the Rockets. is that two things. One, looking at the results of the draft lottery, first off, the small market's just getting absolutely screwed, man. The Hornets, the Jazz, the Wizards all picking right there at 4, 5, 6 after having the best odds to win the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. Like, the NBA just hates its small market teams so much. Not that I'm feeling bad for the Utah Jazz, because it's always FTJ here at Locked On Rockets. But that being said, it is just very funny and sad to see, those teams get kind of screwed over. I will say a couple positive anecdotes here. One, the Philadelphia 76ers keeping their pick, which was top 6 protected. Very good for the Rockets. Very good for the rest of the Western Conference to not add yet another pick to the treasure trove of assets that the Oklahoma City Thunder are currently in possession of. So that was a win if you're any fan of a team in the Western Conference. And then the other one, and this one is, we'll see how this one plays out, but the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets actually had a not insignificant chance of jumping up into that top 4. They had a 9% chance at number 1 overall. They had an approximately like 27-ish% chance, 28% chance, give or take. Or sorry, no, I apologize. Even better than that. They had like a 37% chance. I can't do math of jumping into the top 4 overall. And the Nets also suffering from, the Mavericks and Spurs jumping up. They get bumped all the way back down to pick 8. And that is beneficial for the Houston Rockets, who still own that 2027 swap with Brooklyn. And that is important because if Brooklyn had walked away with a franchise-altering talent like a Cooper Flag or a Dillon Harper, or even one of those other top prospects like an Ace Bailey, like, it would have meant that the Nets probably would have been a little bit better, a little bit more competitive, better off than where they currently are. Instead, now they're stuck picking down at 8. Are you really going to get an impact player at 8? If you get a serviceable player, you're happy when you're picking, that far out of the top 5. But Nets being bad is still good for the Rockets, and them not walking away, them not winning either of Cooper Flag or Dillon Harper means good things down the line. And hopefully that 2027 swap, and is it actually a swap? Is it a swap or is it the outright pick? Whatever it is, they get their hands on the Nets pick in 2027, be it either a swap or the outright pick. And that's beneficial to the Rockets. So that's at least a small win. And we take those small wins when the Mavericks and Spurs win the lottery. So, all right, let's get to what some of the mock drafts are saying for the Houston Rockets in the immediate aftermath of the NBA draft lottery. Let's start with ESPN, who has the Rockets taking Kasparas Jakucionis. I hope I'm saying that right. At number 10, freshman out of Illinois. Here's their scouting report on him. Jakucionis helped himself quite a bit at Illinois, where he took on an enormous role as an 18-year-old debuting at the Division I level. He's a point guard, by the way. Sorry, should have included that. And put together a strong season despite predictable ups and downs. As part of that adjustment, NBA teams remain largely optimistic that his toughness, playmaking feel, size, and versatility at either guard spot will lead to a promising pro career. There have been concerns about his ability to create separation off the dribble, but Jakucionis' ball screen savvy and room to grow as a shooter should enable him to make an impact as part of a team's rotation at the very least. NBA intel and fit. The Rockets acquired swap rights to the Phoenix Suns pick in last summer's deal with the Nets. Yeah, we know about that. This pick represents an opportunity for Houston to bolster its deep roster, whether drafting a prospect or using the selection as a trade chip. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. Jakucionis wouldn't directly address a need, but would give the Rockets significant backcourt depth to build with as they weigh the future of their roster, particularly if they decide to move on from Jalen Green and or Fred VanVleet and transition toward Reed Shepherd and potentially the player that they select here. All right, so that's one mock draft down. And I'm curious your thoughts on each of these. And I do want your thoughts on if you want the Rockets to keep this 10th overall pick, who do you have your eyes set on? We're going to be diving into our draft coverage. It'll start ramping up very shortly. So I'm just going to go through these two other mocks really quick. Let's go to, all right, from the Ringer draft guide. We have the Ringer selecting Carter Bryant, freshman out of Arizona. All right. archetypal 3-and-D athlete with an ideal NBA frame and ready-made complementary skill set. Here's the blurb. I remain skeptical that Houston keeps this pick, me and everybody else apparently, but Carter is someone who would have value both to any team the Rockets might do business with and to the Rockets in support of any star they might land. Bryant played a limited role on an experienced team this past season at Arizona, where the touches and shots were spoken for more often than not. That locked him into a spacing and finishing role, which is likely what he'll be doing in the near future in the NBA. That role allows him to showcase his greatest skill, defense. Bryant is the kind of handy, long, and strong athlete who can run the gamut of defensive assignments. So, adding more to the Rockets' defensive versatility, I don't necessarily know if the Rockets need yet another defensive piece or defensive wing when they've got so many of them up and down the roster, right? Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, and then Thompson, like Jayshawn Tate a little bit further down in the wings, right? So, I don't know. And look, you should never draft for position. Drafting for a position of need never works out. You draft best player available. So if Carter Bryant is the best player available at 10 and the Rockets are dead set on making that selection, then I'm all for it. And I do like the idea of a player who is malleable enough to fit into what the Rockets are trying to build, but also could be a valuable trade commodity if they decide to strike a deal a little bit later on. Because let's face facts, if the Rockets do decide to try and flip this pick, they might not be able to achieve a draft night trade. Now, a draft night trade is more versatile because whatever team you do initiate a trade with then gets the opportunity to pick their own prospect, as opposed to you picking a prospect in, a couple months down the line. You're like, hey, we have this young guy. He hasn't played a single NBA minute, but do you like him? And kind of hoping that pans out. All right. So that's the read on Carter Bryant. Let's go player comps here really quickly. Jordan Walsh, Tari Eason, one of the player comps, Tumani Kamara, Aaron Gordon, Marvin Williams. Okay, so a little bit more of the same of some of what the Rockets already have on their roster. Let's do this final mock draft from The Athletic this time. The Athletic has the Houston Rockets at number 10, selecting Colin Murray Boyles, 6'8", wing/forward, 20 years old, out of South Carolina. Here's the blurb. The Rockets are loaded across each position. They have a veteran point guard in Fred VanVleet and drafted their point guard of the future in Reed Sheppard at number 3 last year. The organization is still extremely high on Sheppard despite his lack of playing time this past year. They have their center of the future in Alperen Sengun. I think they will just take the best player available in the lottery, and at this spot, that's Murray Boyles for me. He's a tremendous defender and would fit in perfectly with how Ime Udoka wants to play. He also passes well and has serious toughness to play with many of their players. He processes the game at an elite level as the kind of prospect the Rockets valued in the past. Okay, not too bad. The read here from across 3 different mock drafts now, though, feels like, he's an Ime Udoka type of player. And I kind of feel like the Rockets need to get away from Ime Udoka type of players, right? They need to diversify their assets. They need guys that can score the ball. That doesn't mean you draft guys that can't play a lick of defense, but at the end of the day, they need some shooting upside. They need some scoring upside. Like was mentioned with the very first mock draft with Jakucionis, maybe they need to hedge their bets a little bit with a guard selection if they do decide to potentially either downsize Jalen Green's role or just move on from him entirely this offseason, both of which are legitimate possibilities at this point with where the Rockets are headed this next season. So those are a few of the different mock draft blurbs. Coming up, I want to talk about the more than likely scenario, I feel like, of the Rockets not making a selection with the 10th overall pick and what they could possibly find themselves doing with it and why they need to not sit on their hands and just be content with drafting another young prospect. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout performance, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Look, these playoffs have delivered some of the best, most exciting performances we've seen in recent memory. You had upsets across the board in the second round of this postseason. And right now, you can go take a look at the odds-on favorites to win the NBA title this season. Right now, the OKC Thunder sitting at -105 to be the champs this season. That doesn't really seem fair to the Denver Nuggets, considering that they have that series tied up at 2 games apiece right now. And I'll tell you what, if you could have gotten in on some of those Dallas Mavericks odds to win the NBA draft lottery, you'd be sitting really pretty right now. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, let's focus in here on what I feel like and what many others feel like is the likely outcome for the Houston Rockets with this 10th overall selection. And that's just to flat out trade it. Now, what they trade it for is the $1 million question. Do they trade it and kick the can down the road and just recoup some assets? Do they trade it for a rotation quality piece? Do they maybe package it with one of their young core members and get a slightly better rotation quality piece, maybe like a 3-and-D role player, somebody that can, plug and play some minutes and just knows their role, kind of slots in seamlessly on any team? Or do they make it a part of a much larger deal in pursuit of a star player? In our draft lottery preview pod, we did talk a lot about, the Rockets and their supposed cooling off as it pertains to any potential future pursuing Kevin Durant and or Devin Booker from the Phoenix Suns. And honestly, that feels a lot like posturing. It would be silly for the Houston Rockets to not consider going after one, or maybe not both of those guys, but one of those guys to improve the team right now. And then the biggest available star on the market, a star that the Rockets are actually one of the odds-on favorites to potentially land this offseason, and that's Giannis Antetokounmpo. And so the Rockets are in this very delicate position in the Western Conference where, yes, they overachieved. Yes, they won 52 games. Yes, they were the number 2 seed in a very tough Western Conference. But they also didn't really get bitten by the injury bug too badly across the board. Like, most of their key contributors were available for most of the season. Fred VanVleet missed 16 games. Jabari missed a couple months. Tari was on, injury maintenance watch a little bit. Sengun missed a small stretch of games. Jalen played every single game. Like, you look up and down the rest of the Western Conference, a lot of other teams were dealing with substantial injuries to key contributors throughout much of the season. It's not crazy to think that a lot of the teams in the Western Conference are going to come back better and stronger this next season. First off, the Lakers coming back, right? They're going to have a roster that's actually built around Luka and LeBron. That's got the right pieces. They're going to go find an actual NBA starting center instead of running Jackson Hayes as their starting 5, right? It'll be JJ Redick in year 2 of being a head coach instead of being a rookie head coach. The Nuggets are potentially, hey, look, the Nuggets are looking like they might be about to push the Thunder to the brink here in their second round series. And I mean, I don't know, they dealt with some serious health issues this season with Aaron Gordon and Jamal Murray and MPJ, and a lot of guys missed time on their roster. And they've still got the best player in the world. The Clippers, maybe they run it back, maybe they don't. I don't know, but they're probably not going anywhere. And they've got James and Kawhi, and I don't know if they'll be better next year. The T-Wolves really struggled for most of the season, and they're kind of finding their groove here in the postseason. So they'll probably be better. Like, what I'm getting at here, and obviously, and I talked about it in segment 1, right? Mavericks and Spurs are both absolutely going to be better this next season. Now, what that looks like, whether it's just Mavericks take Cooper Flagg, Spurs take Dillon Harper, or maybe the Spurs swing a big trade for Giannis or some other kind of impact player. Hell, maybe OKC gets involved in the Giannis sweepstakes, and they feel like that's the missing piece that they need to put him over the top if they lose to the Nuggets here in the conference semifinals. The point here is just that the Rockets cannot just sit on their hands. They can't. They absolutely cannot. All the talk about continuity and running things back, and we think everybody on the roster is going to get a little bit better. That's awesome in theory, right? But it's much harder to bank on that. And when you have like there are certain players absolutely that it feels like they're going to come back and be better in their next season, right? Amin Thompson is going to have a year 3 leap, and you saw him getting exponentially better as the season went on. You're optimistic that Alperen Sengun, after focusing so much attention on his defense this past season, that he comes back with a renewed focus offensively and reestablishes the touch that he had in the first 3 seasons of his NBA career. And again, that's not pie in the sky optimism. That's okay. He was really efficient and really effective the first 3 years that he was in the NBA, and then his numbers fell off a cliff in year 4. And you can make an argument, right? It's because he transformed his body. He was in the weight room. He focused on defense, maybe not too much, but all these different things. The Jalen Green transformation, that's going to be the biggest one, right? Can Jalen take another step forward? In watching Anthony Edwards dominate the Warriors in this playoff series so far, the biggest thing that stands out, and this has been the concern with Jalen for pretty much his entire career up to this point, is he's not a physically imposing presence, right? Ant probably has about 20, maybe 30 pounds of muscle on Jalen Green. Like Jalen's, I think, listed weight is like 185 or something. And so Jalen is much more in that Ja Morant tier of like body type. And if you're going to be wiry and not have the muscle to just bulldoze past guys and absorb contact and make your impact at the rim and getting downhill, then you have to be an absolutely elite ball handler. You have to have the ball on a string, and you have to be a really crafty elite finisher around the rim. Otherwise, you're just not going to thrive, right? Ja Morant has an entire bag of moves that he gets to in the painted area, the little floaters and teardrops, and, watching him make those acrobatic layups where he jumps in the air and has insane body control and twists and turns and still finds ways to finish through traffic. And Jalen hasn't figured that out yet through year 4. He got better this past season, and there were moments where he would get to his little like corkscrew layups and things like that, and he'd have some impressive finishes, but he fully relies on his speed and his quickness and his explosiveness to finish at the rim. He has to beat his defender because he doesn't have enough strength to power through his defenders on a consistent basis. And so that's the hope for Jalen, right? Can he actually put on 5 pounds, 10 pounds of muscle in one off season? That's a pretty tall order for a guy with his body type, right? But the Rockets, to me, simply cannot just sit here and hope, okay, we think that everybody on the roster is going to come back better and we're happy with where we're at. The West is going to get tougher. The Southwest Division is about to get tougher. The Rockets may not be the best team in the Southwest Division next year. Like, I think they're the favorites to be the best team. But if the Spurs make a Giannis trade and they've got a big 3 of Wemby, Giannis, and De'Aaron Fox, and the right supporting pieces around them, what are the Rockets going to do? The Mavericks are walking into Cooper Flag, and they're going to have this jumbo size, Anthony Davis, Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, Cooper Flag front line, defense first. Yes, they're going to be missing Kyrie, but they were still kind of able to keep afloat without Kyrie for various points this past season. So who knows what that Mavericks team looks like, and who knows how good they look once Kyrie does make it back next season. To me, there's just too much going on in the West to be content with just running it back next season. You can't just re-sign Fred VanVleet and Steven Adams and call it a day and then draft the 10th overall pick and draft yet another young guy who you're going to have to slow play the development on. The Rockets need to be aggressive. They need to make a move. And unfortunately now, they might not even have the best offer to make in a Giannis trade. That's a whole different discussion, and we will explore that in the coming days. What would a Giannis trade look like for this Rockets team? What would the players, what players would need to be involved in a Giannis trade? And what would the team look like after potentially acquiring Giannis? Would this team actually be better trading for Giannis, or would they be better off not making a move like that? But the team, the player that keeps coming back, and I keep coming back to it, and you guys are going to get sick and tired of hearing me talk about this name, but it's going to have to be a Kevin Durant trade. That's the one piece, the one player that you can go get that does elevate you right now, that you don't have to completely mortgage your future for. And that gives you an opportunity to stay competitive and be legit title contenders for the next 2 to 3 years. And then in that 2 to 3 year window, you hope that one of your other young guys on the roster, be it Thompson, or maybe Alperen Sengun levels up again, or if you find a way to get Kevin Durant without giving up Jalen Green, then you hope that Jalen Green ascends and figures it out, right? Maybe Reed Shepherd is that guy. Or maybe the Rockets just cash in on one of those other picks further down the line from the Brooklyn Nets or some of those Suns picks down the line, and they're able to swing a different star-level trade down the line. It wouldn't necessarily be a fully all-in move for KD. He's probably the cheapest star available on the market this offseason, and he's the one that would probably elevate the Rockets and this current version of this team the most. So I'm going to be, if you're not on the KD train, I hope that I'm going to be able to convince you otherwise before this offseason is over, before the Rockets make whatever moves they're going to make, or before he gets dealt somewhere else. But while everybody's eyes are focused on Giannis, the Rockets' eyes should be focused on KD. And whether they use that 10th overall pick or not, trading that pick seems like the more than likely outcome for this team moving forward. I want your thoughts. I want your reactions to the draft lottery. Is the NBA rigged? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you want to see the Rockets do with this 10th overall pick, all that good stuff. As always, thanks so much for checking out the show. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.